Well, I should begin with my name is Tommy, and I'm in recovery from many, many addictions in my life. And maybe it would be good to name just a few of them, and then we can talk about that. So I have experienced drug addiction of many different kinds of drugs. I've experienced alcoholism. I've experienced food addiction. I've experienced sex addiction. And I've experienced codependency, relationship type issues. I've experienced gambling. I've also experienced cigarette addiction. And I've experienced technology addiction. These are sort of the big ones. I also know what it is to be stuck in patterns of belief and patterns of behavior in general that don't serve me. And so that point right there is sort of a key part of my story. And we'll come to it in just a little bit. I want to share with you my experience and my strength and my hope that today, this incredible day in the middle of this incredible month of talks that we're doing, that we can all be uplifted together. So here's my experience. From a very young age, looking back, I can remember the sensation of, let's just call it energy. The sensation of energy, which was bigger than me. Energy that I would experience, which was bigger. That is to say, more powerful than me. At the time, that was not evident to me. So the energies, for example, of anything that would alter my consciousness, like that's something towards which I could be gripped in this very big energy. Certainly with girls, women, gripped in this very intoxicating energy, bigger than me. With food and with life in general, I would, certain situations and certain times, engage in life in a way that was out of control. And that's what I mean by I'm familiar with the concept of energy and influences and behaviors and mental processes that are bigger than me, meaning I don't have control over them. They get control over me. Although at the time I didn't completely see it that way, if that makes any sense at all. So for somebody who goes through life that way, being highly sensitive, emotionally feeling things very deeply, and now recognizing that there was sort of an energy to the way I was in the world, which was out of control. Going through life that way can be very uncomfortable. And I tell people that my earliest understandings of myself, my reflection of myself, was simply limited to anxiety. That is to say that my sense of myself was as an anxious being, meaning always moving, never stopping, constantly hyperactive as a kid, eating food purely for stimulation, purely for sedation, never having a relationship with food or this body, which was just based on pure energy and pure comfort, but everything was about getting high or getting low, or moving sort of between the two. So all my effort in the world seemed to be very frenetic, very kinetic. Parents would describe me as hyperactive in every way. And they would often say to me, why can't you just sit still for 5 minutes? And I will tell you a story about myself that's very, very telling about this. I was coming home from school, and maybe I was a 10-year-old boy. I was on a school bus, and I was one of the last stops. So it was just me and one of the teachers who was on the bus. That sort of was the matron of the bus, if you will, that sort of escorted all the kids, made sure they got home, that kind of thing. So it was just me and this person left. Now, on this day, I had a migraine headache. Through my childhood, I was plagued with three things physically, medically: strep throat, bronchitis, and migraine headaches. Those were the three things that happened physically in my body as a result of my diet, the addiction to sugar, constantly moving, never stopping, never resting. So when I got a migraine headache, that was one of the very few times in my childhood when I was ever still. Only if you saw me with the headache, you would remark to yourself, there's something wrong with this child. Because I was literally like, in so much pain and just so internal with this headache. And that's how I was on the bus. And I remember the teacher saying to me, I've never seen you still. I've never, ever seen you still. And now that you're still, it's like you're catatonic. Like there were only really two speeds for me. It was like shut off completely or, to the hilt. Like there was nothing in between for me in the way that I approached life. I just ran around like that. And I know now that this was about anxiety. Things in my subconscious that felt like everything was not okay. And even today, at 30 years sober, in a 54-year-old body, I need to be careful and attentive to anxiety because that is the precursor to my addictive behaviors. That is the precursor to me acting out in some way because of that anxiety, driven by things in my subconscious, meaning I'm not even aware of these things. And that's where I have to be really careful. At this time in my childhood, I didn't have any awareness of this. I didn't have any sense of it. I just knew I had a splitting headache and I couldn't move, or I was out playing sports all day, all night, bouncing off the walls, eating sugary foods, and just being crazy generally. So what happens to a kid like that is if you can't sit still and you can't focus your mind, you can't really complete any task. So procrastination becomes the cornerstone of your life. And when procrastination is a cornerstone of your life, you start feeling really poorly about yourself. If you weren't already, now you're going to really feel poorly because you're not able to make forward progress. You're not able to say, oh, I want to complete this task. And then you don't have the wherewithal or the power to complete it. And then repeat that through an entire childhood of incomplete, 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 never finished, never finished, never prepared, always behind, always behind. And even me telling you about it now, it's so stressful. And I have sadness. I feel sadness for that boy. I feel sadness for that boy because he just didn't know any other way. Just didn't know how to break out of it. So it should come as no surprise to anybody that I tell you, when I found, for me, it was pot, when I found marijuana, cannabis, and I got high for the first time and felt in my body and my mind this profound shift. It was the first time in my life that I could remember actually taking a breath. It was like that. And I remember laughing, giggling. And I was a hyperactive kid on the energetic side of life, right? So I wasn't depressive unless I had a headache. I wasn't on the depressive. I was always excitable, always exciting, and always wanting to enjoy and adventure and explore and all this. So it wasn't new for me to laugh, but the quality of my being, the way that I was laughing, the way that I felt, I dropped down into my body, out of my head, and it was intoxicating. It grabbed me by the soul. And I remember thinking, oh, this I was 13. I had the awareness to say, this feels incredible. I'm going to want to do more of this. This is working for me. Now, just in this 10 minutes that I've been speaking to you, I'll ask you this question, which is the question I would ask myself about anybody that I'm working with in recovery. Why would that boy stop using this thing? What would have to happen? I mean, if you found the solution to your life's anxiety and you felt so good, so comfortable, and you knew of no other way to create that same comfort, why would you ever stop? And then, of course, it goes on, through years and years of cannabis use, it goes on to all of my friends in my community use cannabis. I connect more deeply with people around cannabis. Cannabis has worked its way into all of the activities of my life. I connect with girls around cannabis. I have an identity around cannabis or linked to cannabis. Later on in college, I would be selling, so there was a money connection to cannabis. And so what happens is someone like me built an entire universe supporting this thing, which naturally I would want to champion to the world, because didn't it save me from these horrendous emotions and these difficult anxiety? And didn't it allow me to actually live a life that would not have been possible without it? Of course it did. In the early going, it showed me something, gave me something. It was a medicine, and I was self-medicating. Here's the part that I didn't understand at the time. All medicine can be poison. All things considered to be poison can be medicine. And the thing that matters is the dose. So in Ayurvedic medicine, in the sister science of yoga, they say dose alone determines the poison, or it determines the health. That's the first thing. The second thing is medicine is meant to make itself obsolete. Meaning, if something's truly medicine, it treats a condition so that you no longer need that medicine. Otherwise, it can go into another category, a different thing. I was treating a condition, self-treating it, with cannabis. But what I noticed was when I didn't have cannabis, when I tried to stop smoking for a while, or when I just ran out and couldn't get it, I became extremely irritable, extremely anxious, extremely unfun to be around. And my sole purpose in those moments would be to get some pot, find it, get it, smoke it, use it, employ it in your life. So you see, I had become dependent upon this substance to help me deal with a symptom, anxiety, hyperactivity in the mind and the body. But it never allowed me to get down to the cause and the condition. It didn't shift me. It didn't heal. It deferred. It deferred my pain. It deferred my discomfort. But it didn't deal with the thing that was causing my pain and my discomfort. I just didn't know that at the beginning. And I didn't know it till many years later when I was trying to stop or trying to do things in my life. And again, that feeling of, wow, I can't seem to complete a task that would come into my life. So that was my relationship with cannabis, a love affair for many years, which ultimately would lead to an understanding that it was now preventing me from moving forward, where at first it showed me a glimpse of something. It it did transform my anxiety into relaxation, albeit temporarily. So it gave me that gift. And I was able to use it for many years to continue to repeat that experiment of going out of anxiety into comfort, even if it was drug-induced comfort that would then wear off and that you'd have to use the drug again to repeat it again. But it gave me something for a while. It ended up taking a lot from me. And it was so deeply embedded in my body and my mind that, it would take years for me to heal psychologically, years for me to heal spiritually, years for me to be able to connect with the true voice within me, to connect with my higher power, and to move beyond the dependence of this thing. Now, while all of this was going on with cannabis, alcohol was a player there. And then psychedelics were a big player there as well. And, without going into too much detail about psychedelics, I can honestly tell you, grateful that I found them the same way that I'm grateful that I found cannabis when I did. Grateful to have learned the lessons from them. And they taught me many things, showed me many things. And again, ultimately, they were kind of like, in a way, like a parent, like a parent birdie. You're in the nest and you're about to fly on your own. Psychedelics kind of kicked me out of the nest and said, you better learn to fly, because dependence upon substances for you, Tommy, not going to work out. You're going to have to deal with your life, deal with your behavior, deal with your subconscious shit, get it up into the light and work on it, process it, and move through it. But at the time, I had no method. I had no understanding of how to do it. I couldn't see 5 days in front of my face. And so I had no idea what to do or how to, I didn't even really know what the problem was. And so I kept going. And I kept depending upon substance, and I kept depending upon, everything except the thing that would ultimately heal, which was for me to sit still and start to take a look at my life, for me to be silent, for me to tell the truth to somebody and have somebody reflect back to me, I understand, I've been there, and there's a way through this. Let me show it to you. I would not find that experience of healing for many years to come. About 9 years after I started using cannabis and then psychedelics, and then the last 2 or 3 years, I entered what I call just the very dark phase. People ask me sometimes, was there any value? Like I've expressed value in finding marijuana when I did. I've expressed value in finding psychedelics when I did. People ask me, was there any value in you doing cocaine, smoking crack, doing heroin? Was there any value in it? And truthfully, those things destroyed my life. The only thing I can ascribe to them as value was that they brought me to my knees. They humbled me. They humiliated me. I humiliated myself in relationship to those drugs. I lost all sense of grace, all sense of purpose, all sense of possibility, all hope gone, all promises broken, all truths unspoken, all lies spoken. And that was all behind those drugs. But the one thing I can say is they brought me to my knees in sheer humiliation and humility and horror. I was brought to my knees enough to experience a true bottom, a moment when I was willing to tell the truth to somebody, and that somebody was my father. I'd been going at it for so many years, and my family knew. They knew that I was in trouble. They did not know what to do about it. I was very stubborn. And like many addicts stuck in addiction, I shut out anybody who got in between me and my substances. If you tried to get in between me and my substances, you were excommunicated from my world. And that was swift and complete excommunication. I did not want to hear it. And I did not want to hear from you. You just didn't understand. You just didn't get it. You didn't get me. And by the way, you were the deluded one, because you didn't understand, the the beauty of all these experiences that I was having. So I reached the bottom. I called my father. It's a very long story, which I'll make short for right now. He was there for me. My mother was there for me. My family was there for me. And my father basically said, look, you have to get help in treatment. With great misgiving, I agreed to go. I went to Hazelden. What I tell people, that was really my alma mater. My alma mater is Hazelden Drug and Alcohol Treatment. And I went there and changed my life forever. It was the seeds of recovery were planted there. My first experience of recovery of abstinence from drugs and alcohol for many, many years happened there. A lot of the armor that I had put up was broken through there. A lot of the lies were fixed. Some of the behavior was fixed as much as you could fix in, 30 or 40 days. Let's just say I began the process. And what I came out of treatment with was the seed of an idea. And I guess the idea was this. It is possible that I have been wrong about many things. It is possible that I could live this life based on something else than my relationship with drugs and alcohol. It is possible. It's possible that I may even want to do that. Even though at 40 days sober, when I left treatment, in my mind, I wanted to stay sober, but I had no idea what that meant. Other than abstinence, I had no idea what recovery was, what it would take to go through time and space as a sober person, to make a conscious decision that on a one day at a time basis, I would not use drugs and alcohol, and I would see what came of my life. That's an incredible commitment for anyone to make for any amount of time. So my hat's off to anybody who even tries. If you're like me, you try because you had to, because you were desperate. And that's what it was for me. I had the gift of desperation, and I went, to treatment. I got out of treatment with some seeds planted, and then I went out to live my life. What they told me when I left treatment was, you have to go to meetings. They suggested Alcoholics Anonymous for me, because at that time, Narcotics Anonymous was as yet a younger program, right? It was a young program. And there weren't people in NA with a huge amount of time. There were many, many, many more people at that time with a lot of time in Alcoholics Anonymous. And so they felt that would be a better choice for me, to get around some people who'd been around for a while. I did not, well, I should say, the only thing I did in my early first year of recovery there was I went to meetings. But I did not treat recovery like recovery. I just went to a meeting to check a box and say to myself, I went to this meeting today. I didn't share about myself much. I didn't really get to know anybody. I didn't understand that life and spirituality and recovery and success and joy, like, we're all enmeshed together in this beautiful way. To me, it was like, oh, the way I'm going to live my life is over here, and my recovery is over here. I'll go visit my recovery every now and then I'll go back to my life. I don't recommend that as an approach, because what happens is this recovery thing happening over here, it won't hold any weight, or at least it didn't hold any weight for me. When it doesn't hold weight and meaning, it becomes boring. Meaning I'm sitting in these meetings asking myself, why am I here? This doesn't have any meaning to me. I don't want to be here. All of a sudden, you start going to fewer meetings. And then eventually you stop going to meetings altogether. And now you're in this really interesting place, which is I'm abstinent from using drugs and alcohol, but I'm kind of floating. Like I don't have any ground beneath me. I don't have a foundation. I don't have a practice. There's nothing I do every day. I have nothing to lean on. I'm just floating in the wind. I'm at the whim of the world around me. And so on those days where the world around me seemed to go okay, I seemed to go okay. When the world around me didn't go the way I thought it ought to go, that was a shitty day. So I was completely disempowered, utterly at the mercy of the external world. No sense how to live as a person, no sense how to be a human being and show up with integrity, grace, consistency. I wasn't developing in any way. I was just floating. I say to folks in early recovery, if you don't have a plan for your recovery, then you have a plan, and your plan is to leave recovery. There has to be sort of a structure that you step into. It's so important. And that was true for me. So when the structure was no longer there, and when I stopped going to meetings, it was just a matter of time, and I relapsed. When I say I relapsed, what I mean by that is, yes, I started using alcohol and cannabis again. I stayed away more or less, with only one exception, one occasion. I stayed away from the hard drugs because, frankly, I was so frightened of them. And I remember what had happened to me. So I stayed away, but I was in this in-between place of drinking alcohol and using cannabis and being in this floaty, unclear, weird place. And after about a year of trying to get sober, so I'd stay sober for a few days and then go back, stay sober for 2 weeks and then go back, stay sober for 3 weeks and then go back. This went on for a year. And I was in New York City. My mom had just passed away, which was a thing of great difficulty for me and for my family. Very disorienting, very confusing, very painful. And there I was, I was living alone at my mom's house, the house I had grown up in. My sisters emotionally couldn't be there. So I was just there by myself in this house with ghosts and memories and energies. And there I was floating in my quasi recovery, trying to get sober. And finally, I just couldn't take it. I had a job. I had a girlfriend at the time. I had a little money in my pocket. It was okay. But there was a feeling that I couldn't handle that was coming up for me. And the feeling was, I'm never going to know what my life could have been. I'm never going to know. And that thought was in my brain like a nail being pounded into my head over and over, so painful. I'm never going to know what my life could have been because I can't put down drugs and alcohol. I can't do it. And after a while, maybe a few months, 3 months of sincerely, that's the mantra in your head. You're trying to get rid of it. You're even trying to drink it away, trying to smoke it away, anything to get it away. But when I closed the door to my mom's home, my home that I had grown up in, and it's just me in there, man, I can only tell you, I couldn't tolerate it. It was just me and that thought. And so one day out of the blue, I went to, this is June 21st, 1991. I went to a meeting, raised my hand with 1 day sober. I'm 1 day sober, trying to make it here. That night I went out and I got high at a concert. Next day I went back to that same meeting at 12 noon. Raised my hand. I'm Tommy, I'm 1 day sober. That night I went out again to another concert, got high, came back the third day in a row to this meeting. My name's Tommy. I'm 1 day sober. And at the break of this meeting, this guy sort of corners me, physically and sort of in every way corners me. And he says, I bet you think you have family problems, girl problems, money problems. I bet you think that's your problem. And he's like, that is not your main problem. Your main problem is that you're walking the earth with untreated addiction. And it was like, boom, right to the heart. Open heart surgery in that moment. Truth going in. Wow, untreated addiction. And he said, there's a treatment for it. You have to apply the treatment, but you'll get better if you do. It was so matter of fact. It was so simple. There was no room for argument, The right words delivered in the right way at the right time. I started to go to meetings. And then within 2 months of that moment, I found a sponsor, because I had moved cities from New York. I moved to San Francisco. I found a sponsor and I started working the steps. I just simply want to report to you that I came to the steps and I came to every effort of my recovery kicking and screaming. That I fought it every step of the way. I did it my own way and created a lot of pain and difficulty for myself. I always said no first, and I asked why? Why do I have to do this? Why doesn't everyone else have to do this? This doesn't make sense to me. Why do I have to do this? When will it happen for me? When will it happen for me? When will the war stop? And my sponsor fielded all of this energy, all of these questions. It will happen for you, he told me, but it won't be in your time. And you may not even notice it when it happens. And he was exactly right. I worked the steps to the best of my ability, which wasn't very good, but I did the best I could. And it was good enough. And it happened. And by it, I mean, I woke up one day and I no longer desired to use drugs and alcohol, period. It was gone from my life and it has never returned since then. Since that moment, it's probably now 29 years, because I'm guessing I was about a year in. For 29 years, I haven't had a thought of using drugs and alcohol. And that's remarkable for somebody who had come to rely on it to the extent that I had. And then life began in a different way. And different kinds of work and different kinds of growth, different kinds of spiritual growth began. Life will show you through challenge and difficulty, pain and suffering, where you have to work. But while you're feeling the challenges, you'll also get to experience joy along the way. I was so joyful in those early years, so joyful. I had so much joy. I was so grateful to be sober, sincerely. I was so grateful. I had turned that corner into gratitude, like, wow, this is amazing that I get to be sober and not be plagued with the idea of not being sober. And I was in San Francisco, when it was 1991, 2, 3, and 4, and the Grateful Dead were there. That was their hometown. And so we were a part of that world. And a lot of my Grateful Dead head friends, they got sober too. And so we would go to meetings together 7 nights a week. We would go to Grateful Dead concerts and we would go to meetings at the concerts. And we were dancing and experiencing the highs of that music and the highs of community. But there was no drugs and alcohol involved for us. I got to experience San Francisco in what I would say was really a great heyday of that city. Got to have a lot of laughs and to be in a lot of beautiful relationships with just the most beautiful and radiant and extraordinary women, and have these wonderful experiences, it was amazing. And I also got to experience the challenges that would naturally come up for someone like me. Challenges around codependency, challenges around gambling and money, me identifying my purpose and a mission to be in the world in a meaningful way. Challenges with other forms of addiction like cigarette smoking, just that. Like that was a mini war every day. Like when I smoked cigarettes, I never wanted to smoke cigarettes, but a part of me must have. So it served me in some way, but another part of me was like, no, this is not conducive. This is not us. And so there it is. The war begins again. So the war of addiction, the frequency of addiction that I write about, speak about, was alive and well in me in some ways, but not in the drug and alcohol way. And my life improved so much in those years. I worked the steps. I started to work with newcomers and work with other young men who wanted to go through the steps. And I did a lot of that work. And I got to see people get sober. And I got to see, this whole talk series that we're doing is called Stories of Victory. I got to see examples of victory every day around me. And it was such an important part of my early recovery. And it's an important part of my life now. I just want to be around people who are victorious. They don't have to be, Olympic athletes. They don't have to be, wealthy or wildly successful in business or the most incredible, whatever thing is. The victory we're talking about is the day-to-day work of being present, the day-to-day work of being here and now and real and honest and vulnerable and compassionate and kind. Those are the victories that I'm talking about. That's what this series is all about, is we've overcome addiction, to a great extent. And every single day we have another opportunity. And well, I couldn't tell you that, I'm not sure that addiction ever leaves the human condition unless you become a fully enlightened Buddha, that on a daily basis, there are going to be things that we have to grapple with that could trigger us. There may still be some subconscious drivers that are working upon us, but our victory is that we're willing to look at it no matter what, that we're willing to stick around no matter what, that if things get difficult, we don't just say, oh, fuck this, I'm going to leave. No, we stay here and we surround ourselves with other people that help us stay here. And we surround ourselves with teachers and guides and people who can help us when the going gets difficult. And then we get to see ourselves become useful to somebody else. When somebody comes to you and says, I'm in a bit of trouble, can you help me? As I have said to people so many times in my life. And I've never gone to anyone in my life and asked for help and have them say no. I never have had that happen. I have never gone humbly to another human being and asked for help and had them say, no, I'm sorry, I won't help you. So that's a good thing to sort of remember, Recovery 2.0 became a focus in my life because of the healing I was able to experience through the work with my teacher, Guru Prem. I was blessed with a teacher. And I worked with him for many years in the early 2000s. And he was able to help me really to get down deeper than I had into that anxiety piece, to release the stuckness in the body, the stuckness in the mind. He helped me get rid of an experience of chronic pain that I was feeling in my back, which was very debilitating and a big problem. And he gave me a vision for recovery that was even beyond the vision I had already been given for recovery. And that was already an epic vision. And so I followed his advice and I did the things that he suggested that I do. And my life got even better. And then I started to meet all these other teachers. Amazing, the most amazing people. And I got surrounded by all these quite wise people. And these wise people became friends and counselors to me, guides for me. And I could approach them as a humble student and say, here's what's coming up in my life. I'd love your thoughts on it. It was the same thing that I'd been taught in recovery in the 12 steps. And so it just continues. That the victory that I'm grateful for today is the end of the conflict. That the conflict of should I be doing this or should I not be doing this? It's not that I don't ever have conflict in my life. I would hardly be a human being if I didn't. Conflict comes up in life, in our lives, right? The conflict I'm talking about is the one where you're not sure whether to face things or do something to not have to look. That conflict is over for me. My choice is to look. My choice is to be present. My choice is to learn what I can from the pain. My choice is to be here, even in the difficulty of being me. The unbelievable mistakes I still make in my life. The unbelievable joys I get to experience in my life. The amazing people that I get to work with in Recovery 2.0. And the unbelievable community we have in Recovery 2.0, where we're all together, almost every day, and get to support each other through this path, what we call the path of discovery. So this is the victory for me, is I don't desire to use drugs and alcohol. I don't desire to distract myself from the experience of being alive. When I do, I notice it's difficult and I change and I learn. And that's just sort of the ongoing one day at a time experience. One more thing to leave you with in this last couple minutes. I have experienced, and I do experience addiction as a frequency, like an attunement in the body, a frequency, like a movement, And I've come to understand through yoga and meditation and breath work, primarily those three modalities, all of which are connected, right? It could all just be called yoga, but those processes of yoga, meditation, and breath work, I have found a time-tested, proven, effective way to change the frequency by which I exist. I can't say it any more plainly than that. I've learned how to change my emotional state at will, whenever I want to. I have learned how to elevate myself to become more aware. I have learned how to create and build upon a spiritual connection with God. And to begin to continue to hear the language and to work with the language of God as it expresses itself to me. God, I'm looking at God as the intelligence of the universe, just the intelligence in everything. Here's some water. It's intelligent. I bring it into my body. My body, with its intelligence, seems to know what to do with this water. That's a miracle. That kind of thing in everything, all the time, everywhere. And so the language of that and being able to relate to that and being able to tap into that has been not just effective and helpful for me, but joyful, unbelievably joyful to have that experience. So this changing of frequency is a ongoing thing. The daily elevation, we stress, I stress it, daily practice. And again, for me, it just makes everything possible. It doesn't guarantee I won't make mistakes. It doesn't guarantee a perfect day. It doesn't guarantee that things aren't going to happen in the world that do affect me, that do, create an influence, whether that's a positive influence or a negative influence. I'm still susceptible to the world around me. And recognizing that I must do this work of frequency modulation in my recovery. And the tools are yoga and breath work and meditation. And so between the 12 steps, now we have some new wording in Recovery 2.0 called the 12 efforts. Between all that, yoga, meditation, and breath work, healthy diet, my relationships, my love relationship with my wife, my love relationship with human beings in general, become possible. Becomes possible. It's all possible now. And it's all here, and it's all now, and it's all happening, and we're all blessed to partake in it together. And so I want to leave you simply with this idea that absolutely, I did this so imperfectly, I can't overstate it. You couldn't have made more mistakes than I made. That's how I feel sincerely. And yet it worked for me. So if I could do this so imperfectly, so like, kicking and screaming, struggling, anyone can do this. Anyone can have recovery, real and true freedom in their life. It's just a one day at a time thing. So I encourage everyone to step into it, come and be with us in the greatest circle, which is the human circle. And it's the circle of all beings, everybody working to move from where we are into greater freedom, greater love, greater connection, into the oneness of all things. And thank you. That's what I got today.